Boston. They were building something. It feels like they've been building for a long time, but it seemed like finally the next level of Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown and Marcus Smart, instead of being the young guys with Al Horford and Kyrie and Isaiah, now all of a sudden these guys were built to be leaders, and they had become leaders, and they had gone through a lot. And now they're about to be on their third head coach in 3 seasons. Let's not, and I understand it's still within the organization, and I get that, but the fact that this young team is now, after coming off of finals, and like, hey, can we build on this? We were 2 games away, from possibly winning a championship. That's like 2-3% better from each player. And so now that you're going to get a new head coach with a new rhythm and a new feel and a new idea, and so I think for me, I know it's always funny when they were like, oh, most times coaches don't step down, because if you step down, you do not get paid. Typically, if you get fired, then you get all of your money. You get all of your money still. So coaches are going to always be weary of like, I'm going to step down, I'm going to step away. They're more likely, if you don't want me here, fire me. But in another year, Ime's going to come back and then try and coach this team the same way he had and had built up. That's going to be a very, very difficult process, not only for him, but for the players and the organization. Everyone loses in this situation.
Richard, and you talk about that, what it could look like next year trying to come back. And listen, I'm told it's going to be a 1-year suspension. That's what they were finalizing today, and they would announce it at some point today. But it is not necessarily a guarantee that he is back in this job after a year. Who knows what happens with Joe Mazzulla as an interim coach and how they move forward with Udoka, how this plays out. So there are no guarantees. But listen, I do think Ime Udoka made such an impression on people in this league. The job he did in Boston last year. I don't think the final chapter has been written on his head coaching career in the NBA, whether that's in Boston or somewhere else.
We've seen other high-level executives and coaches recover from things like this. Often it's in, to your point, a different place. And maybe that ends up what's happened here, because as you said, it's just cognitively, it's hard to figure out how this works. You just go away for a year. The team does what it does. Maybe they're awesome. Maybe they take a step back and you just walk back in the door and coach the team. It seems awkward and certainly strange.
Well, the Boston Red Sox had that with Alex Cora. He was suspended for a year for cheating. And next thing you know, he's back a year later. So in Boston, the Boston fans, that group, they've seen this something along these lines where a coach you hire, all of a sudden he's got to go for a year and then come back. So this is not unprecedented in sports, but even in the Boston area in the last 5 years. So I think there are ways to do it, but it's like, that's a long trust road back.
Well, no, hold on. That's way different, because the cheating that Cora was doing was trying to put the team in position to win the World Series. And so there was a level of, even though he was wrong, the other people understood that he was trying to do it for each person's best interest. In this case, Ime's on an island, and it's going to be hard to gain the trust from the ownership to front office, and then it's going to be snickers all around about what happened when the team hits turbulence. Imagine, before January 1st, this team was trying to find its rhythm. And he's done so very much to put himself in position to get this job. He's played all over the world. He's played in the NBA. He was an established assistant head coach. And it's just really unfortunate now that he gets his opportunity, these decisions are now potentially going to cost him that job.
Well, and right now what we know is that it's likely going to be a 1-year suspension. Right now we are waiting for the Boston Celtics to announce the details, the specifics of what that will look like, and we will cover it as soon as we have a panel here to cover every angle of this story and the press conference. I'm joined by senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski, senior writer Zach Lowe, and our analyst Chiney Agumake. Thank you all for being here. Woj, I wanted to start with you here. What stood out to you as we heard from the Celtics brass for the first time?
Well, listen, obviously the seriousness with which they took the violation that occurred in Boston, the fact that they were willing to suspend a coach with no certain return date, if ever, who got them within 2 games of an NBA championship in the middle of what they thought would be, and still hope can be, a championship window. And certainly I think you saw the gravity, I think Brad Stevens wore it, of the impact that this entire episode has had on that organization, specifically women in that organization, beyond just a particular woman who had a relationship with Ime Udoka. And so, Listen, I think this has been jarring for the Celtics. It's certainly jarring for those involved. I think it has been jarring for people all around the NBA.
Zach?
It's been shocking. It's in a lot of ways was more shocking than the Robert Sarver story that shocked all of us for a year. What struck me the most was I've never seen Brad Stevens look like that before. Brad Stevens is distraught. He's shaken up. And it evinced to me, you know, this was his hire. This was the guy he tabbed to coach the team. And it looked almost like he felt a sense of betrayal. And look, this whole story has been incredibly uncomfortable because at its base, it is a human story with families that are going to be wrecked. There has been a rush just across the board, a rush to identify the woman, which was frankly disgusting, a rush to evaluate the severity or lack of severity or whatever you feel about the suspension, a rush in some corners to defend Ime Udoka without really knowing all of the facts, all of the workplace dynamics, all of the power dynamics, and all of the implications of those power dynamics. Does someone have to get reassigned, moved around, demoted? What are the potential implications of that for the Celtics organization legally? These are enormously complicated issues. But my broader takeaway was Brad Stevens looks distraught, and the longer this goes, the harder it is to imagine Ime Udoka walking back in and coaching the team. It's still possible. They made it clear it's still possible. It just seems far-fetched to me.
Yeah, and, you know, watching the press conference, I actually took notes. And there were two things that I'd like to reiterate that we all heard. One, that the Celtics brought in an independent law firm to conduct the investigation. And I know that there's a lot of chatter online about, oh, this was a consensual relationship between two, you know, adults, whatever the case is, because the internet and social media takes a life of its own. But when the workplace is involved with relationships, there's protocols, there's rules, there's standards that elevated this beyond HR to having an independent external law firm come in and make these determinations. And this also shows that, you know, this was based on facts and findings that we may not be privy to or should have to be privy to. And that's the first thing that stood out. The second thing is that no one else is facing penalty other than Ime Udoka. And I feel like this is important because people keep saying we need to hear the woman's perspective. We need to find out who this person is and hear that side as well if we're hearing Ime's side. At the end of the day, the investigation heard all perspectives necessary to come to this determination, and no one besides Udoka received a penalty. And to me, that speaks volumes.
And I think it speaks to a different time in professional sports where, you know, I know people might say, there have been these situations in the past, they didn't come to light. I think, and Wick Grossbeck said it, the Celtics are a corporation and a business, and that perhaps 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 7 years ago, however, it might have been treated differently by an organization because a successful head coach, it is, no one's irreplaceable, but certainly they, as a basketball coach, Ime Udoka, as a leader, they believed, and for good reason, that they had an individual that would be for a very long time leading this organization. An organization maybe in the past would have found a way for this to have not escalated to an internal, bringing a law firm to do an investigation, and then to mete out this kind of punishment. And so I think that's what's different about this, and it speaks to it is the year 2022.
Correct.
Not only that, but you said escalated. And I think it's important to note, we don't know how or when and why it escalated. And that there's a gap of information, both of time and information missing there, that I think would reveal a lot about this story. We just don't know what sort of triggered this from going something that was going on to something that was now being investigated. That is a very